This is the Practice of Therapy podcast with Gordon Brewer. This is session number 32 of the Practice of Therapy podcast. Hello, folks. I'm your host, Gordon Brewer, and I'm so glad you've joined me for the Practice of Therapy podcast. If this is the first time you're tuning in or listening to the podcast, I'm so glad you found us, and I hope you'll continue to listen to other episodes in the future. And if you haven't had a chance, go back and listen to some of the earlier episodes wherever you might be listening to the podcast. And, it's springtime here in East Tennessee where I'm located. I'm in Northeast Tennessee in the upper Northeast corner of the state. And even though it's still a little cool, everything's in full bloom, and my allergies are telling it. You can probably tell I'm a little bit hoarse today, and I've just been, doing the antihistamines and allergy shots and all that sort of thing, trying to get myself cleared up here. But anyway, I'm glad you've joined me. Glad you're with me today. What I'm going to be doing over this next week is something a little different. I've not done this yet, but I thought I would give it a try, and that's going to be do a 4-part series that back-to-back podcasts, one each day. And what I'm calling this is really, I got the idea from the course I created. There's a little course, mini course that I created called Love the Work, Hate the Job. And in that course, what you'll find out is it's really geared. What it's really geared for are those people out there that might be working for an agency or working somewhere else, and they're really thinking about private practice, but not really sure what to do and what steps to take to kind of make that move. And, even in my own story, in my own journey, when I first went into this field, the mental health provider field, whether you're a counselor, a therapist, social worker, psychologist, or whatever, we all probably started at different places with this. But when I first started into this field as a marriage and family therapist, I worked for an agency. And I really loved the agency that I worked for. In other words, I felt like they were doing great work. And I still to this day refer to them, for those particular clients or cases that I feel like might be a good fit for what they provide. But what I found out once I went to work there is that really the intensity that was required of that work just really wasn't a good fit for me personally. There's a lot of demands in terms of documentation and just the being on call and all those sorts of things. I just it's not that I didn't love what we were doing. In other words, I loved the work, but I really hated the job. And so that's how I came up with this course. And you can check that out over at practiceoftherapy.com, Love the Work course. And if you want to, since you're listening to this podcast, I'm giving a 25% discount on that course. So to get that discount, if you'll go to practiceoftherapy.com/Love the Work discount, and that should take you directly to the PayPal link to get the discount. It's 25% off on that course. The course is not that expensive, by the way. It's only normally $27 for the course, but you can with the discount you can get 25% off of that. So anyway, what I want to do with this series is really just kind of outline for folks some of the things that I go over in that course. The course is going to give you much more detail than I am here on the podcast, but I really wanted to do this series with those folks that are really trying to think about whether or not they want to go into private practice. They're already working for an agency or working for someone else, and just really trying to figure out if going into private practice is a good fit for them. And so what I'm going to do is just in this series, walk you through the different things that you need to know about going into private practice and how you would get started and the different steps that you can take. So let's jump into this first part of this series, and I'm going to be talking about what is your why. Back when I first went to college as an undergraduate, several years ago, and as I tell this story, you'll maybe catch on how old I am. But anyway, when I went into college, I really went with the intention of becoming a doctor. I really wanted to go to medical school, or thought I did at the time. And one of the things that I ran into is, as a lot of freshmen do, is that you get really challenged by some of the courses you take, and it's really causes you to really kind of think about what you want to do in life. Well, needless to say, I just struggled with chemistry, and that was really going to be a pretty big prerequisite to going to medical school, to say the least. But anyway, during my that same time period, the movie Ordinary People came out. And if you've not seen that movie, it's an old classic that stars Donald Sutherland, Mary Tyler Moore, Timothy Hutton, Elizabeth McGovern, and Judd Hirsch. And the storyline of the movie is about this family, fairly well-to-do family, and they had the story picks up after a tragedy that had occurred in their family, where their oldest son Bucky was killed or died in a boating accident. He drowned. And the younger son, Conrad, played by Timothy Hutton, is really struggling in his life during that time. He's in high school, and his brother was really popular, and just everybody was just wondering what was going on with Conrad. He had I think a suicide attempt and all of that. But anyway, during the movie, towards the end of the movie, there was a scene where he was working with the psychologist, played by Judd Hirsch, really working through that trauma and that difficulty he had around his brother's death. And it was at that point that really kind of the light bulb went off in my head as a freshman in college that, hey, maybe going in to learn how to be a counselor or a therapist or a psychologist would be a great career, because I was really drawn to it, and it really loved seeing what Judd Hirsch, or the actor Judd Hirsch, did during that scene. So that following semester, when I went back to school, I decided to major in psychology. And so there began the journey that I started into becoming a therapist and a counselor. So my point with all of that is that one of the things that I think is very important for anybody to do as they move through their career or just move through life, and just thinking about going into private practice and just thinking about how they want to navigate their career, is to begin with why, of really thinking about why you chose this career to begin with. All of us have different motivations for why we do what we do, but I think that's a place to start. The other thing I think to look at with when you think about your career and thinking about going into private practice is really thinking about what are your long-term goals in life. Where do you see yourself 5 years from now, 10 years from now, or maybe looking way ahead to retirement? And how do you want to spend your time in your career? And also being able to do things that you know are important to you. And so I think if you look at all of those things first, that can help you really begin to make some decisions about where you want to go in your career and whether or not private practice would be a good fit for you. It's not for everyone, and I'll say that up front. I mean, I think if you are working for an agency or in a job that you enjoy, I would say stay there and learn how to bloom where you're planted, so to speak. But to be able to move into private practice takes a different mindset. It takes a willingness to do some preparation on the front end. It means being able to have, as my friend David Hall said, some intestinal fortitude to be able to kind of make it through some of those struggles that a lot of people run into as they're building a practice and getting enough clients to come in. So that's the place to start. So think about why you might want to go into private practice. What are your reasons for that? If you're working for an agency or working for somebody else, why would you want to switch? And I think you have to look at all the different factors and all the different things that would go into making a switch and change in your career. You have to think about the benefits that you're currently getting. You have to think about what is the potential for increasing your income where you are now. What's the likelihood that you're going to be able to advance in your career when you're working for an agency? So I think those are things that you need to kind of figure out for yourself. Also thinking about your financial goals, just as an individual or as your family. Where do you see yourself, like I said earlier, 10 years from now, 15, 20, 30 years from now, and what plans are you making for your retirement and all of that? So I think as a person moves into private practice, they need to take all those things into consideration. But the place to start is to know your why, know why you want to go into private practice, and also have a clear vision about where you want to go. Now, obviously, that can change over time, but I think, as they say, if you don't know where you're going, how are you going to get there? So let me give you a little bit of a challenge, or maybe a little bit of homework to do. Go and get yourself a notebook or a little composition book or a journal or something like that, and just designate it for yourself to use in thinking about going into private practice. And the first thing the place to start is to begin to write down and journal about your long-term goals. I just heard the other day, or this past week, when I was listening to another podcast, that to write a goal down gives you like a 40 to 60% better chance of achieving that goal just simply by writing it down. So that's my challenge to you, is to begin to think long-term, where you see yourself down the road 5, 10, 20 years from now, and begin to dream about that to some degree, but also begin to put that into words so that you can begin to make plans around that. So in this next series, we're going to be talking about how to formulate a plan, and so some places to begin with that. And so if you'll tune in tomorrow, we'll have more on planning for going into private practice. So thanks again, folks, for joining me today. And do go over and take a look at the course, the full course that's going to go into more detail around this over at practiceofTherapy.com/lovetheworkcourse. And to get the discount, if you'll go to the URL practiceoftherapy.com/lovetheworkdiscount, and you'll be able to get that discount for that particular course and get it at 25% off. So take care, folks, and tune in tomorrow for part 2 of Love the Work, Hate the Job. You have been listening to the Practice of Therapy podcast with Gordon Brewer. Please visit us at practiceoftherapy.com for more information, resources, and tools to help you in starting, building, and growing your private practice. If you haven't already, please sign up to receive the free private practice startup guide at practiceoftherapy.com. The information in this podcast is intended to be accurate and authoritative concerning the subject matter covered. It is given with the understanding that neither the host, guests, or producers are rendering legal, accounting, or clinical advice. If you need a professional, you should find the right person for that.